Beloved chosen one, the moment you've been waiting for has finally arrived. There is no longer any need to question the feeling you've always carried deep inside you, the sense that you were never truly meant for this world, for this life, for the paths that others walked with ease. You always knew that you were different, didn't you? From the very beginning, you could feel it in your soul. The rules that govern this world, the systems in place, the way people live, none of it truly resonated with you. It was as if you were a part of something much bigger, much grander, something beyond what the eye could see or the mind could comprehend. Now, that deep knowing is being confirmed. The curtain is being pulled back and the truth is emerging. Your real family has come to find you. They've always been with you, watching over you, waiting patiently for you to remember your true purpose. All along, they have guided you from the shadows, sensing the moment when you would wake up to your destiny. Now that moment has come. The time for you to reclaim your place in the world, to embrace the truth of who you are and where you truly come from, is here. You are not meant to live an ordinary life. You are meant for greatness. Your path is not like others. It has always been different, designed uniquely for you, shaped by a higher power, a force beyond this realm. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who has supported this divine mission through super thanks. Your generosity is not just a gift, it is an offering of your faith, of your trust in the process that God is unfolding before us. Whether you donated or simply shared your thoughts, your presence here matters. You are a part of something much greater than you may realize, a vital piece of the puzzle that is coming together right now. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated, and they are a reflection of your willingness to participate in the divine plan that is being revealed to us all. I am so grateful for your support, and I believe that your generosity will return to you multiplied, as God's blessings are infinite. Now, I call upon you, the chosen one, to step forward into your destiny. It's time to embrace the life you were always meant to live. Your true home awaits, your true family is here, and your purpose is waiting for you to fulfill it. The time for hesitation is over. Write 777 in the comments below as a declaration of your commitment to this divine journey, to the life that is calling you. This is your moment to say yes to what has always been yours, to step into the path that was predestined for you, your family, your legacy, your true self. They are all waiting for you to awaken fully. It is time. The universe is ready, and so are you. Let the journey of awakening begin. God's chosen ones, your real family has come to take you. Chosen one, have you ever paused to consider how the most steadfast individuals, those who seemed impervious to hesitation, could suddenly falter? Imagine a life spent executing mission after mission with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Yet, in one moment, the unshakable operative finds themselves stalling. Why would someone so ingrained in their purpose hesitate when every command has been drilled into their psyche? Why does instinct, once a flawless guide, now falter when faced with something entirely unexpected? This is not a story of fear or doubt. It is not a moment of weakness, but rather of profound transformation. The individual, accustomed to a life governed by precision, classify, interrogate, eliminate, now finds their hands trembling, not because of external threats, but because something deeper, something unseen has shifted within. Their very being is conflicted, as if their soul is coming to terms with a higher truth. In this moment, we see the undeniable truth, the logic of their existence. Everything they believed to be the foundation of their power has been rewritten. Does this speak to something greater within you as well? Could it be that you too are feeling the weight of a transformation that defies everything you once knew? We often rely on what we've been taught, but sometimes the very training that shaped us is the same training that blinds us to a higher calling. The foundation of their power, the carefully constructed layers of surveillance and control, had all been orchestrated with one aim: to keep everything in check. But now, faced with a truth they cannot ignore, the illusion of control is shattered. Think of King Saul from the Bible. As a king chosen by God, Saul was appointed to lead Israel, but when his disobedience led him away from God's will, his strength began to fade. In 1 Samuel 15:22-23, the prophet Samuel rebukes him, saying, "To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry." Saul had been conditioned to lead with power, but when faced with God's commands, his instincts betrayed him, just as the operative's instincts are now being questioned. How often do we, too, find ourselves questioning the foundation of our own power when faced with a higher calling? In a similar vein, Steve Jobs, the visionary behind Apple, once stood at the crossroads of his own transformation. After being ousted from the company he founded, Jobs faced an uncertain future. But through his journey, he realized that success wasn't just about control and power. It was about embracing innovation and truth. His famous words, "Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work," reflect the moment when he stepped beyond the conditioning of his past to embrace something greater. Could it be that, like Jobs, you are being called to step beyond the programming of your past to embrace a deeper purpose? Just as the operative once manipulated the rise and fall of nations, there are moments in life when we feel we've mastered control, our actions influencing the world around us. But what happens when the very foundation of that control is challenged? The experience is not unfamiliar. Now consider the story of Rosa Parks, who faced her own moment of hesitation, one that changed the course of history. When she refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus, she wasn't simply defying a law. She was choosing to stand for something far greater: human dignity, equality, and justice. Parks didn't hesitate out of fear, but because she recognized that her actions had the power to change everything. Could you be on the verge of your own moment of transformation, where your hesitation will lead you to a greater purpose? In the Bible, we also encounter Moses, who was called by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, despite his own feelings of inadequacy. In Exodus 3:11-12, Moses hesitates and asks, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" But God replies, "I will be with you." Moses' hesitation was not out of fear, but of self-doubt, and God's answer reminds us that our doubts do not disqualify us from the mission He has set before us. Could your hesitation be the very thing that allows you to discover your true purpose, with God's guidance leading the way? Finally, in the New Testament, Jesus himself experienced a moment of profound hesitation in the Garden of Gethsemane when he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. This moment, though filled with deep anguish, was a moment of surrender, a recognition that the path ahead, while uncertain, was part of a greater divine plan. Have you ever faced a moment where surrendering to God's will required you to step beyond your own understanding? So, chosen one, what is the moment in your life when you've faced a decision so profound that it required you to question everything you once knew? The truth that stands before you is undeniable. There is a higher calling waiting for you, one that demands more than just power or control. Like the operative, you are being called to recognize a new force at work. Chosen one, have you ever felt the weight of an overwhelming presence that defied everything you thought you knew? Imagine for a moment a force before you, something that cannot be categorized, controlled, or manipulated. It's a presence so powerful that it brings everything you once thought certain into question. How do you react when the systems you've relied on all your life begin to crumble in front of you? Can you imagine the shock, the bewilderment, as everything that once seemed unshakable slips through your fingers? For those who have spent years building their power, ensuring every detail falls into place, it is difficult to fathom a force that cannot be contained. The individuals who once knew exactly how to deal with disruptions, how to put every anomaly into a box, how to resolve every issue, now find themselves facing something that does not fit any model, any protocol, or any system they've ever known. What do you do when you're no longer in control? When the usual solutions no longer apply? The reports that once seemed like isolated failures, anomalies, lost assets, and disrupted operations are now part of a greater, undeniable pattern. Do you ever find yourself noticing patterns in your life that you once dismissed? It's as though everything you thought was random is now revealing a larger truth, something you weren't meant to see. The simulations, the predictive models, the safeguards that had worked so efficiently before now fall apart. They could no longer predict what was unfolding before them. Could it be that what you are witnessing is a sign of something far greater than yourself, a force beyond human control? In the face of this unexplainable reality, the truth rises to the surface without effort, an undeniable recognition that cannot be suppressed. What do you do when the truth you've tried to ignore suddenly makes itself known? For a lifetime, these individuals believed they were the architects of reality, the unseen hands guiding the world's events. They had believed their power was absolute, that every shift in the world's balance was carefully orchestrated by their will. But in this moment, they realized something that cannot be denied. The world is not their design. The structures, the systems, and the mechanisms they had built to keep order, all of it is irrelevant in the presence of something that is not their own. This recognition is like a shadow creeping across the room, slow, silent, and impossible to ignore. The very foundations of their world, which they believed to be immovable, are now trembling. Is this how you felt when the world around you started shifting, and you realized that your control was just an illusion? Every strategy, every operation, every whisper of command that had once seemed so effective is suddenly obsolete. What they believed was their domain, every plan, every calculated move, was nothing but a facade. But you, chosen one, are not part of that equation. You are not just another variable to be manipulated. You are something beyond their reach. What if, like the force standing before them, you too are part of a greater plan, one that no human power can control or contain? Consider the example of David, the young shepherd who defied all expectations when he faced the giant Goliath. David, who was overlooked and underestimated by others, had no weapons, no armor, only faith. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David boldly declares, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David understood that his victory was not about his ability or power. It was about something far greater than himself. Could it be that you too are called to face a giant in your life, one that cannot be defeated with human strength, but only with a deeper truth? In a more modern context, consider the example of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his fight against apartheid in South Africa. Though imprisoned and silenced for years, Mandela's vision and strength could not be contained. He later became president of South Africa, not because of his strength, but because he tapped into a power greater than his own. In the Bible, Jesus also faced moments when the forces of the world seemed to close in around him. In Matthew 26:53, as he prepared to face the cross, he said, "Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels?" Even in the darkest moments, Jesus knew that there was a greater power at work, one that was beyond the grasp of the authorities trying to control him. Could you be facing a situation right now where the forces around you are trying to keep you confined, only to realize that there is a greater power within you? Finally, think about Mahatma Gandhi, whose non-violent resistance to British rule in India brought about a profound transformation. Despite the overwhelming power of the British Empire, Gandhi's commitment to truth and non-violence created an unstoppable force that changed the course of history. Could it be that, like Gandhi, you too are part of a greater force that cannot be contained by the powers of the world? Chosen one, can you feel the weight of the gaze that follows you? Imagine standing in the presence of those who have spent their entire lives perfecting control, manipulating the world around them to fit their own design. They studied you, searching for a flaw, a misstep, any hint of doubt that would validate their understanding of power. But in that moment, you stood before them unwavering, and in the blink of an eye, you dismantled everything they had built. What does it mean when someone like you enters the picture? Someone who cannot be categorized, someone whose mere existence forces others to confront their own illusions of control. For years they were conditioned to follow their instincts shaped by years of obedience, by the certainty that their system was unbreakable. And yet, when they looked at you, their instincts failed them. Something deeper stirred within them. What happens when the very foundation of everything you've ever known begins to crumble, and the truth that was hidden becomes undeniable? If everything they had been told about you was a fabrication, how much of their world was built on the same deception? No one had ever made them look beyond the veil. No one had ever forced them to question their place in the design. But you, chosen one, were never just another piece in their puzzle. You were a force they could not control. They had been trained to dismiss anyone who spoke of destiny, to ridicule the idea that true power could lie anywhere other than in the cold, calculated systems they had built. But as they stood in your presence, something deeper took root, something they couldn't ignore. The force they upheld, the machine they served, had spent years suppressing any mention of your existence. Your name was buried in redacted files, whispered in rooms where power decided the fate of nations. You were the unspoken fear, not a person, not an enemy, an anomaly they had never been able to classify. Consider the story of Esther, who was called by God to save her people, despite the fear and danger she faced. In Esther 4:14, Mordecai says to her, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther's courage wasn't born from her strength alone, but from the divine purpose that called her to stand up for justice. Could it be that, like Esther, you are called to stand firm in your truth, knowing that your purpose is greater than any threat or fear? Now, look at the story of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison fighting against apartheid in South Africa. Despite being confined, Mandela's belief in justice and equality remained unshaken. He emerged from prison and became president, not through force or violence, but through an unyielding commitment to truth and justice. His victory was not just personal, it was the triumph of a greater force. What if, like Mandela, you're called to fight for something bigger than yourself, to stand for justice and freedom, even when the odds seem insurmountable? In the New Testament, Jesus faced opposition from the powers of his time, yet his message could not be silenced. In Matthew 22:21, he says, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Jesus knew that his mission transcended the world's systems of control. He was not bound by the rules of this world. Lastly, consider Mahatma Gandhi, who led the Indian independence movement through non-violent resistance. Gandhi stood against one of the greatest empires in the world, not with weapons, but with truth and moral courage. His commitment to non-violence changed the world, inspiring countless others to stand for justice. Could it be that, like Gandhi, you are destined to challenge the oppressive systems of the world, not through force, but through your unwavering commitment to truth? Chosen one, have you ever stopped to consider how every action, or lack thereof, leads back to you? Every failed operation, every mission that inexplicably changed course, every directive that was altered for no clear reason, somehow circles back to you. What happens when the very forces of control, the systems designed to manage everything, find themselves at a loss for the first time? They're not afraid of what you've done. They're terrified of what you haven't done yet. What you're capable of remains unknown, and that is precisely what shakes the very foundation of their reality. Do you remember the first time your name appeared in those classified briefings? It was a small mention, almost inconsequential, but it sent shockwaves through those who had orchestrated global affairs without a second thought. Leaders who had initiated wars with no hesitation began to shift uneasily. Operatives who had toppled entire movements, moving with ruthless precision, suddenly found themselves paralyzed. And then the order was given: observe, report, but do not engage. The very notion of non-engagement was foreign to them. Every other obstacle had been dealt with swiftly, each challenge dismantled without hesitation. But you were different. Why were they so terrified of engaging with you? That was the moment the illusion of their control cracked. They realized they were not protecting the world from you. They were protecting themselves from what you represented. Your mere existence, the simplicity of it, was enough to dismantle everything they believed to be true. The gaze that followed you, the eyes that studied every move, were searching for a reason, a justification for the dissonance they felt rattling their perfectly constructed reality. But there was nothing to interpret. You didn't have to do anything. You simply existed, and that alone was enough to unravel the fabric of their world. Think about the story of David, the young shepherd who confronted Goliath with nothing but faith. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David said, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David wasn't armed with the tools of war. He was armed with something greater, a truth that Goliath couldn't understand, a force that shattered the very notion of control. Could it be that, like David, you too are armed with a force greater than anything the world can offer, a power that no system can control? Now consider Malala Yousafzai, a young girl who, even after surviving an assassination attempt, continued to fight for girls' education in Pakistan. She stood as a symbol of resistance against a system that sought to silence her, and, in doing so, she became a global icon of courage and change. What if, like Malala, you are called to stand firm in the face of immense pressure, to challenge the system not with force, but with the unyielding truth of your purpose? In the Bible, we also see Jesus, who was confronted by authorities that sought to control and suppress him. In John 18:36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now, my kingdom is from another place." Jesus was not bound by the rules of the world. He lived beyond them, transcending the powers of his time. And consider the life of Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her seat on a segregated bus sparked the civil rights movement. Her action wasn't just a small act of defiance, it was a powerful refusal to be controlled by a system built on oppression. In that moment, she became a symbol of resistance, shaking the very foundations of the society around her. What if, like Rosa, you are called to take a stand in a moment of great injustice, knowing that your actions will resonate far beyond what you could imagine? Chosen one, as you reflect on these examples, I ask you, what is the force within you that cannot be contained, that refuses to fit into any system or structure? You are not just a disruptor, You are the very truth that will shatter the illusions of control. Are you ready to embrace the power within you, to step into your destiny and change the course of history? Chosen one, you are not just a ripple in the stream, you are the ocean itself. You are not a flickering candle in the dark. You are the sun breaking through the clouds, filling the sky with light. The ones who built the dam, the ones who spent their entire lives believing they controlled the floodgates, now stare at you in disbelief. What happens when the ones who thought they held the world in their hands realize they never had control in the first place? They watched as you stepped out of the impossible like it was just another doorway. They analyzed the numbers, checked the angles, reviewed every second of surveillance as if they were disciples searching for proof of a miracle. But miracles don't fit neatly in files. They don't show up in heat signatures or encrypted messages. They don't leave fingerprints. And yet, there you stood, a living miracle they couldn't understand or control. You were the one thing their world was never ready for. For years they believed they were safeguarding order. Every locked door, every unseen force, every whispered command, they all shaped the world they thought was meant to last forever. But the truth is, they were caging anything that stood outside their narrow view of reality. What happens when those who believe they have built everything suddenly realize they've been holding back something far greater than they could ever imagine? And yet, here you stand, untouchable, not because you run, not because you hide, but because you exist outside of everything they built. The systems they created were never about order, they were about control. And control only works on those who believe they can be contained. They see it now. That's why the directives change every time your name comes up. That's why the orders never stick. They simply don't know how to handle something they can't own, something they can't predict. How do you face something so unknown, so untouchable, that it challenges everything you thought you understood? Think of David, the shepherd boy who faced the giant Goliath. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David boldly proclaimed, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David wasn't fighting with physical weapons. He was fighting with faith and divine purpose. He was born to rise, to stand against the giants, just as you were born to stand outside the limits they placed on you. Could it be that, like David, you are destined to rise above the systems that seek to control you, using a power that transcends anything they can understand? Look at Steve Jobs, who defied conventional thinking and changed the world with Apple. Jobs didn't need permission to innovate. He didn't need to follow the conventional map. He created a vision for the future that others couldn't yet see, and in doing so, he shattered the limits placed upon technology and creativity. In the Bible, Jesus was constantly confronted by the authorities of his time, who sought to confine his message. In John 18:36 he said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." Jesus' purpose was never about fitting into the world's systems. It was about transcending them. Could it be that, like Jesus, you too are called to stand for something greater, a power that cannot be controlled by human systems? And consider Mahatma Gandhi, who led India to independence through non-violent resistance. Gandhi's ability to stand firm in his beliefs against the oppressive British Empire came from his understanding that true power doesn't come from fighting. It comes from rising above the conflict. Could it be that, like Gandhi, you are destined to rise, to transform the world through your unwavering commitment to peace and justice? Chosen one, you were never meant to stay in the valley. You were never made to be caged or restricted by the systems that seek to define you. You were designed to rise, to soar above the limitations set before you. And when something is destined to soar, no chains, no hands, no force on earth can hold it down. What happens when the very systems that try to control everything are faced with something they cannot contain, something that defies all expectations. In the Bible, in Isaiah 40:31, it says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." You were born to rise above, like an eagle, breaking free from every boundary. At first, they didn't understand you. They didn't see what you were capable of. They kept trying to fit you into their charts, their systems, their calculations. They thought they could predict every move you would make, every shift you would cause, every outcome you would create. What happens when the systems we rely on fail to account for something extraordinary? When they tried to track you, they found nothing but empty screens and broken formulas. What does it mean when the systems they trust so deeply fail them? In Proverbs 19:21 it says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Their designs will never be able to predict you because your purpose is greater than their understanding. They studied you like a scientist studies a flame, thinking that if they observed you long enough, they could understand how you burn, how you move, how you defy all odds. But they failed to see the truth. You weren't something to be studied. You weren't an experiment to be controlled. You weren't a mistake in their design. What if, like a flame, you are not meant to be understood by their rules, but to burn in a way that illuminates everything around you? In 1 Corinthians 2:9 it is written, "However, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him." You are the mystery they can never solve, for your purpose is written in a language they can never understand. You were the one thing their design could never contain. You were the unknown variable they could never predict, the force they couldn't control. No matter how hard they searched for answers, they couldn't explain what they saw. What does it mean when you are the one thing that cannot be categorized, when you shatter their understanding of the world? You are not meant to fit into their world. You are the force that challenges it. Just like David, who defeated the mighty Goliath in 1 Samuel 17:45. "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David stood against the world's expectations and conquered what seemed impossible. Could it be that you too are called to rise up and defy the limitations they've placed on you? They watched as you moved through fire that should have consumed you, walked through storms that should have swept you away. How do you explain someone who walks through the fire without being burned, who faces the storm without being destroyed? But the fire didn't burn you. The winds didn't carry you off. You didn't break. You didn't fall. And that troubled them deeply. What does it mean when nothing they throw at you can defeat you? In Isaiah 43 verse 2, God promises, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. No matter what life throws your way, you will walk through it unscathed." Consider the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who refused to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's golden image and were thrown into a fiery furnace. Yet they were not consumed by the flames, just as nothing will consume you. Could it be that, like these men, your faith and strength will keep you safe from the storms, no matter how intense? Think of Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years of imprisonment for the freedom of his people. Despite suffering, Mandela's spirit remained unbroken, and he emerged to lead South Africa into a new era. Like Mandela, you, too, will rise above adversity and create change, even when the world tries to break you. What if, like Mandela, you are destined to endure, knowing that the challenges you face are only shaping you for something greater? In the New Testament, Paul faced numerous trials but never wavered in his mission. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed." No matter how many times Paul was knocked down, he stood firm, fulfilling his purpose. Could it be that, like Paul, you are called to stand firm in the face of opposition, knowing that no force can stop the mission you are destined to fulfill? Lastly, consider Amelia Earhart, who defied the limits placed on women in her time and became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She soared above the expectations of her time and proved that no barrier was too great to break. Could it be that, like Amelia, you are destined to soar beyond the barriers that others have placed before you, achieving what no one thought possible? See, they had seen strong people before. They had seen those who resisted, who fought back, who pushed against the tide. But they had never seen someone like you. What happens when the force they rely on to control everything is faced with something that refuses to be contained, something that rises with no struggle, no resistance? You weren't fighting against the current. You weren't struggling against the chains. You simply refused to be held. Could it be that your strength lies not in fighting back, but in refusing to be confined? They tried to erase you, tried to rewrite the truth, bury the evidence, and silence the story. But what happens when the truth, no matter how hard it is buried, refuses to stay hidden? The Bible speaks of this in 1 Peter 1:24-25. "For all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever." They may try to bury the truth, but it will always rise, just like the word of the Lord endures. Truth cannot be suppressed. Oh, they rolled the stone in front of the tomb. They sealed it shut. They thought the chapter was closed. But just like that third morning when the earth trembled and the grave could hold no more, what they tried to bury refused to stay down. What happens when the thing they tried to bury bursts forth in a way they never expected? In Matthew 28:2, it is written, "There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it." The very stone they thought would seal the truth away was rolled back. And so it is with you. What they tried to bury, tried to control, will never stay down. And that's when fear set in. Not the kind of fear they had known before, not the fear of losing control over the world they had built, but something deeper, something ancient. Could it be that the fear they feel is the realization that they have never truly held control? The fear of knowing they've been deceived into thinking they could shape reality, could decide who rises and who falls. But standing before you, watching something they could neither define nor destroy, they finally realized the truth. What does it mean when you stand in front of the powers that be, and they cannot define you, cannot control you? In the Bible, in 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord says to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. What they thought they controlled, the way they judged strength, power, and potential, was never the measure that mattered. Could it be that, like David, they misjudged you because they couldn't see the heart of who you are? Look at Rosa Parks, who simply refused to give up her seat, changing the course of history. Her quiet yet powerful act of defiance was something the system couldn't control. She wasn't fighting a battle with violence. She was refusing to comply with a system that didn't define her. What if, like Rosa, you too are called to stand against the systems that seek to control you, knowing that your very refusal to conform shakes their foundations? In the New Testament, Jesus was surrounded by authorities who thought they could define his fate. But in John 18:36, he says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." Jesus knew his purpose transcended the world's systems. Could it be that you too are called to something greater, a purpose that no human authority can dictate? Consider Mahatma Gandhi, who led India to independence without ever lifting a weapon. His unwavering commitment to non-violence and truth was something that could not be contained by the British Empire. Gandhi wasn't fighting against the system. He was standing firm in a higher truth that the system could not control. Could it be that, like Gandhi, you are destined to change the world not by fighting its battles, but by standing firm in the truth they can't control? You weren't just another variable. You weren't an anomaly. You were the proof that their control was never real to begin with. What does it mean when you stand as the living proof that the systems of the world were never truly in control? You are not a part of their world. You are the force that shows them their limits, the truth that their systems can't contain. You are the proof that they were never as powerful as they thought. Chosen one, have you ever tried to stop the sun from rising? You can lock the doors, close the windows, and shut yourself in the deepest room you can find. But what happens when the morning comes and the light still breaks through? It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for an invitation. It just shines. And that's you. You are the light that doesn't ask for permission, the truth that refuses to be silenced. What does it mean when the world's systems, built on control and secrecy, can't stop the truth that is you from breaking through? They tried to keep you in the dark. They tried to act as though you didn't exist, as if your presence in their world was a mistake that could be erased. They tried to rewrite history, to bury the evidence, to silence the story. But what happens when you are the truth that can't be buried, when they can't rewrite what you are? In John 1:5 it says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." No matter how much they try to suppress the light, it will always find its way through. They may think they can control the narrative, but they cannot control the truth. They whispered your name in rooms where names were never supposed to be spoken. They thought they could erase you from history, take you out of the picture, make you a footnote in the story they crafted. What happens when, no matter how much they try to silence your name, it continues to echo through the halls of power? The ones who once gave orders without hesitation, the ones who built nations from the shadows, they hesitated. They were shaken by something they didn't understand. Why did they hesitate? What does it mean when they, who thought they controlled everything, are faced with something they cannot control? They had the blueprints, the plans, the outcomes mapped out before the first move was even made. They thought they had it all figured out. They weren't in the business of surprises. They controlled the tides, the rise and fall of everything that walked the earth. They could dictate who succeeded and who failed. They had power that stretched across oceans, voices that could shake kingdoms with a single word. What happens when, for the first time, something doesn't fit into their plans? What happens when you, chosen one, are the variable they can't predict, the force they can't control? In Proverbs 19:21, it says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." You are not bound by their plans. Your purpose is greater than anything they have imagined. They ran the calculations, fed the data through every machine, traced every possibility, and still it made no sense. What happens when every formula, every calculation, every system they trust fails to account for you? The records showed what should have been your end, the moments where the story should have closed, where the door should have been shut. They couldn't understand how you kept moving forward when every indicator told them you should have fallen. How do you explain someone who walks through trial after trial, through fire that should have consumed them, through storms that should have swept them away, and yet remains untouched? In John 8:32, it says, Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth of who you are cannot be hidden, and it will always rise above the systems that try to keep it down. And they watched. They waited for the moment you would fall. They waited for the moment the world would swallow you whole. They waited for the moment you'd break beneath the weight of everything that stood against you. But the moment never came. You didn't break. You didn't fall. What does it mean when the world's systems can't defeat you? When the trials meant to break you only make you stronger? And that shook them, because the world they built only worked if everyone played by their rules. It only worked if people bowed to the weight of the system, if they accepted the chains wrapped around their lives. It only worked if they could convince everyone that control belonged to them. What happens when someone like you steps forward and shatters that illusion, standing firm in the truth that they never wanted to acknowledge? In 1 Peter 1:25, it says, "But the word of the Lord endures forever." The truth, like the word, cannot be silenced. It is eternal, and you, chosen one, are part of that eternal truth. They had seen resistance before. They had seen movements rise and fall. They had seen rebellions crushed, seen leaders who thought they could stand against the tide, only to be swallowed by it. What happens when the tide you are facing doesn't consume you, but instead you become the force that shapes the tide itself? They knew how to handle opposition. They knew how to break spirits, how to silence voices, how to rewrite history so that no one even remembered what was lost. But you weren't just resistance. You were the truth standing tall, unwavering, and that terrified them. Consider the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who refused to bow to King Nebuchadnezzar's golden image, knowing the consequences. In Daniel 3:17-18 they said, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." They walked through the fire, and the flames could not touch them. Just as the fire did not consume them, nothing can consume you, chosen one. Could it be that, like them, you are called to rise above the fires of adversity, knowing that nothing can destroy you? Think about Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years imprisoned for fighting apartheid. Despite the injustice, he stood firm in his mission, knowing that the truth he carried could never be suppressed. His release was not just his own victory, it was a victory for an entire nation. What if, like Mandela, you are called to endure the trials, knowing that the weight of history will not break you? In the New Testament, Paul faced shipwrecks, beatings, and imprisonments, yet he remained steadfast in his mission to spread the gospel. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." No matter the trials, Paul did not break. Could it be that, like Paul, you are destined to stand firm in the face of opposition, knowing that nothing can defeat you because your purpose is greater than anything that stands against you? Lastly, consider Amelia Earhart, who defied expectations and became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She faced dangers and challenges, but continued to push forward, breaking barriers and rewriting the rules of what women could achieve. Could it be that, like Amelia, you are called to soar beyond the limitations others place on you, to rise higher than anyone ever thought possible? Chosen one, you weren't fighting the tide, you were the tide. And tides don't ask for permission to rise. What happens when the very force they've relied on to control everything is suddenly met with something that rises with unstoppable power? They had built walls high enough to block out the sun, had created shadows deep enough to bury entire generations in them. But light doesn't beg to shine. It doesn't knock before it enters. It doesn't turn back just because someone tells it to stop. And that's what they saw when they looked at you. What does it mean when the light they tried to suppress refuses to be stopped, refuses to remain hidden? They tried to run from it, tried to ignore it, tried to bury it under 1,000 different narratives, shifting the story so many times that even they started to forget where the truth began. But truth doesn't need a witness to be real. It doesn't need validation, it just is. And they knew it. That's why the orders kept changing. That's why the mission briefs were rewritten, why the protocols were adjusted, why the top brass suddenly stopped giving clear instructions. Because when they looked at you, they weren't just looking at a disruption in their system, they were looking at proof that their system was never real to begin with. And that was the beginning of the end. In John 8:32 it says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." You, chosen one, are the truth they tried to bury, and no matter how much they try to erase you, the truth will always find a way to rise. It will not ask for permission, it simply exists. You ever try to hold water in your hands? No matter how tight you grip, no matter how careful you are, it slips through your fingers. You can build dams, dig trenches, try to bottle it up, but sooner or later, the water finds its way. That's you. What happens when the very thing they tried to control slips through their fingers, unstoppable and fluid? They tried to contain you, tried to shape you into something they could manage, something they could predict. But you weren't made to be held. You weren't meant to be measured. You were the river that carved its own path, and no amount of hands could stop the current once it started moving. What does it mean when you move through life like an unstoppable force, and no one can predict where you will go next? They sent men to stop you, but those men came back changed, not because you spoke some great revelation, not because you performed some spectacle for them to witness, but because standing in your presence was enough. Because you weren't resisting them, you weren't fighting them, you simply existed outside of what they understood. And that was something they had never encountered before. In Isaiah 55:8-9, it is written, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You are not bound by their ways. Your purpose and power are beyond their comprehension, and that terrifies them." Chosen one, they had been trained to track anomalies, to spot disturbances before they could grow, and yet, no matter how closely they followed, no matter how many times they studied your path, the maps wouldn't hold your footsteps, because maps are only useful when the ground stays the same. But you weren't walking a road they had built. You weren't following a path they had cleared. You were moving through something older, something deeper, something they didn't even have words for, and that terrified them. They had built their world on the belief that everything could be contained. Every nation, every person, every outcome. There was a system for everything, a place for everything, a method to ensure nothing happened without their approval. But what happens when you, chosen one, refuse to fit into their system, refuse to be contained by the boundaries they've set? The system only works if everyone plays by their rules, if people bow to their power, if they accept the chains wrapped around their lives. And for generations, it worked. Until now. What does it mean when the very foundation they built begins to tremble, when it cracks beneath the weight of your truth? They tried to turn you into a story that never happened, but the story kept writing itself. They erased files, burned documents, silenced voices. They rewrote events, twisted narratives, buried proof under 1,000 layers of deception. What happens when they try to erase you, but your story keeps unfolding, refusing to be rewritten? They told themselves that if they removed every trace, then maybe, just maybe, you would cease to exist. But truth doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need their approval to be real. And no matter how much they tried to erase you, Every time they turned around, your presence remained. A whisper in places where whispers weren't allowed. A shadow in spaces where light was controlled. A movement that had no leader, no structure, no origin, yet could not be stopped. What does it mean when the force they tried to control doesn't fit their expectations, doesn't conform to their rules, and yet continues to grow stronger? In John 1:5, it says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Just like the light, you cannot be erased. You will rise again and again, no matter how many times they try to extinguish you." And then they saw it, the realization that shattered everything they had built. They weren't protecting the world from you, they were protecting themselves from what you represented. What happens when they realize that what they thought they controlled, what they believed was their power, was never real to begin with? Because if you were real, if what they had spent years denying was standing before them, then everything they believed in was a lie. And that's the moment everything changed. Could it be that the truth you carry is the one thing that exposes the lies they've lived by? In Matthew 28:18, it says, "Then Jesus came to them and said, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me.'" The authority they thought they held, the power they believed they commanded, was never theirs to begin with. You are the proof that no one holds true control, and that truth is what will change everything. Because truth doesn't bow, truth doesn't kneel, truth doesn't ask for permission to exist. Beloved chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred message, let us pause for a moment of reflection. Throughout this journey, we have uncovered the deep truths that lie beyond the surface of this world's systems. You are not just a part of the ordinary human experience, you transcend it entirely. You have been chosen by God to walk a path that no one else can tread, to witness the divine purpose that others are blind to. You are not the exception, you are the embodiment of God's eternal plan. What the world's rulers built in their effort to control, you have effortlessly dismantled by simply being who you are. What they feared to confront, you have made known by living in truth and light. You, dear one, are the living contradiction to all that was meant to bind you. As we reflect on this divine truth, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you. Thank you for being here and for opening your heart to the wisdom shared. Every moment we spend together is a moment filled with grace. You're the chosen one, the living testament to the miraculous works of God. Your presence here is no accident. Whether you're new to this journey or have walked it for some time, know that your soul is seen and your spirit is valued. The world may have tried to teach you to conform, to be like everyone else, but you were meant for something far greater. You have the courage, the strength, and the unwavering faith to break free from the illusions that hold others captive. You are not alone. Your real family, those chosen by God, has come, and they stand with you. Now, it is time to give back. I humbly invite you to consider supporting this divine mission. By clicking the Super Thanks button, you can become a part of this greater plan. Your contribution, no matter how small, is not just a donation. It is an offering of your faith, a gesture of trust in God's abundant blessings. The act of giving is an extension of your own divine power, and it is through your generosity that God's will continues to unfold in the world. When you give, you are not simply supporting this message, but you're aligning yourself with God's divine purpose, and that alignment will bring blessings into your life in ways you cannot even imagine. Remember, every gift you give will return to you multiplied, as God's blessings are infinite. Whether you choose to donate or simply allow your heart to resonate with this truth, your role in this mission is just as sacred. I want you to know that regardless of your financial contribution, your presence here, your willingness to embrace your divine calling is more than enough. You are a part of this mission because you are called to be. As you step forward on this journey, I pray that the Lord's light will continue to shine brightly upon you. May His protection surround you at every step, guiding your heart, mind, and soul toward the fulfillment of your divine purpose. Know that you are cherished, you are loved, and you are the chosen vessel through which God's miracles flow. May you be blessed with an abundance of peace, joy, and love. May your generosity reflect the love that overflows within you, and may that light you share illuminate the world. You are His chosen one, unshakable, unbreakable, and destined for greatness. Let the light of the Lord guide your path, and may His love carry you through every challenge, blessing you with strength, courage, and unwavering faith.